going to be in Proverbs 22. I know we've been in Isaiah on Wednesday nights, but I started this year. Every year we have a theme. Normally we put our logo for the year's theme on the TV or on a picture somewhere, and we haven't had that up in a while. But our theme for the year is no excuses. And I've mostly been preaching on that Sunday mornings. My goal usually with our theme is to hit it maybe not every month, but like once every couple months. I think we've had 6 of these messages already. And that really the thought as we came into this year was God actually has a lot to say in his word against excuses. And so that'll help us grow and help us increase if we get rid of some of them. And so that was one of our, this is a year and a time where people think they've got some ready-made excuses. So we thought that was kind of timely to look at that this year. So we've had 6 messages on no excuses this year. We've looked at some characters and events of the Old Testament. But now I'm running out of time this year. And so normally I haven't hit on these on Wednesday nights, but I thought, man, I've still got a couple more. And Christmas is coming around, and I'm going to have to give some Christmas messages. So I only have so many more opportunities left to finish this series off. So we're going to do one of them this evening, and then the last one we'll probably do on Sunday morning. But what we've seen so far in this series is that exerting effort is unpleasant, isn't it? Since the fall, since it took effort to bring forth from the ground and thorns and thistles and labor and sweat, exerting effort's no fun. It's unpleasant. We don't like it. We're just averse to that. We don't like exerting effort. That's because of our sin nature and our carnal flesh. That's who we are. We naturally seek to avoid unpleasantness. Of course, we're not excited about unpleasantness, and so we naturally go with the grain. We don't naturally go against the grain. We naturally want to maximize our leisure time. We naturally want to maximize our comfort. That's who we are as sinners. That's our carnality. And that's why our habit is to look for excuses to not do the things that we don't want to do. If we don't want to do it because it's unpleasant, our mind goes straight to, how can I get out of it? How can I get myself out of this? And what excuse can I make? How can I avoid it? And now, I've pointed this out before throughout the series because I don't want anyone to think that I'm beating them up too much or unfairly attacking anybody. There are, of course, viable and valid, legitimate reasons to not be able to do the things that we normally would or normally should. That does happen. And so don't think that I'm targeting you. Like, we can't help the illnesses that we get unless it's because we haven't really been responsible stewards of our body. For the most part, we can't help that. And we can't help injuries that happen, and there's a lot of things. Brother Brian's probably watching tonight, and he wishes he could be at church on Wednesday nights and around more to help with more. But being 85 and with his living situation and where his trailer was set up, he ended up kind of through no choice of his having to move 45, 50 miles away, and so that just makes it tough. And that wasn't his decision. It wasn't really something that he needs to feel too sorry about. There's sometimes things that really are outside of our control, and so we're not really bashing that. Okay, so that's just kind of the disclaimer. However, what we'll see tonight is that usually what drives excuses is slothfulness. Slothfulness has a big part in driving most of our excuses. So let's look at Proverbs 22 and look at verse 13. Proverbs 22, verse 13. The slothful man saith, there is a lion without. I shall be slain in the streets. Go over to chapter 26 and verse 13. It says almost the same thing. Proverbs 26 and verse 13. The slothful man saith, there is a lion in the way. A lion is in the streets. And that's our text for this evening. Our title tonight is this. It's a question. Is the coast clear? Or are there lions in the street? Or is the coast clear? This man says that what he's getting at, he's slothful. And so what he's getting at is that he's not going to tend to his fields that day. He's not going to keep his business engagements or business appointments that day. He's not going to accomplish what needs to be done that day. Why? Because the coast isn't clear. There's lions out there. He's behind the front door of his house, and he says, there's lions out there. There's a lion in the streets, and therefore, I'm not leaving this house today. Therefore, I'm going back to bed. Therefore, I'm keeping my pajamas on. Therefore, this is my day to play video games all day. And he may kind of pretend to grumble, but it's kind of one of those, oh, I can't go into work. One of those pump the fist kind of things, That's kind of what I picture with this guy. So let me kind of give you, the points will be in the form of questions tonight. So the title is the coast clear? Number one, will it ever be? The first point tonight is the question, will it ever be? I can't do what I'm supposed to do because the coast isn't clear. Okay, but will the coast ever be clear? Is a question that needs to be asked. What he's saying is, today is different. Today is not like other days. There is something out there today that isn't normally out there, and I could get hurt. So I'm not going out there because it's unsafe. I'm not going out there to fulfill my responsibilities and to be productive and to be profitable and to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm not going to do those things today because it's too risky. The coast isn't clear enough for me to do that. And so an appropriate response to that is, will the coast ever be clear enough? Will it ever be a clear coast? Now, another little caveat, of course, if there really was a vicious, hungry, man-eating, wild lion right outside this guy's front door that's licking his chops and ready to pounce, of course, God doesn't expect that man to whistle and confidently strut out the front door and high-five the lion or hug the lion and then go. Of course, God doesn't expect him. That would be naive, and naivety is not of God. That's not what's being addressed here. But the question that the Lord is raising here is this question. The question of productivity versus risk. Productivity versus risk. And the Lord is really asking us as we look into his word, how honestly and how accurately do we assess risk, especially as it relates to being profitable servants for him? How honestly and accurately do we assess risk when it revolves around whether or not we'll be profitable that day? Does risk suddenly get exaggerated? This man says the risk is high enough to excuse a zero productivity day. He says it's too scary out there, so I'll accomplish nothing. And it's justified. It's okay. And what he's doing is exaggerating the risk to avoid labor. He's exaggerating the risk to avoid labor. And that's what the Lord is warning us about in Proverbs 22:13 and Proverbs 26:13. That we'll do that. Why do we do that? Here's a quote that I stumbled on that I think this quote captures why the common sense behind the Lord's indictment of us for exaggerating risk in order to avoid labor. It's this quote. It says, a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what it was built for. A ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what it was built for. You could keep it as safe as you want and leave it in the harbor, and nothing's ever going to happen to it, but then it's completely useless. And that same principle applies. If we say that I will not go out of that door, and I will not leave my house, and I will not tend to my fields, and I will not keep my appointments, and I will not do what I'm supposed to do unless and until the coast is completely clear and absolutely clear from any kind of danger or anything that could ever hurt me, well, then what have we just done? We've just placed ourselves on house arrest for the rest of our lives, because that's never going to happen on this side. There's always going to be dangers out there. And so why do we do that? That happens when we do this, when we overstate the things that prevent us from being profitable and obedient, and we understate the things that enable us to be profitable and obedient. That's part of our flesh. That's what we do. The things that are hindrances that get us out of it, we'll make them bigger than they are. But the things that enable us to just do what we want to do, what we are averse to, what we ought to do, the enablements will minimize and the preventions will maximize to make it easier on our conscience to not do them. That's our nature. Now, is there or is there not actually a lion in the street in these two passages? Maybe, maybe not. If you'll notice, it doesn't say, this inspired narrator, the inspired writer, Solomon, doesn't say there actually was a lion in the street. It's just that's what the slothful man says. So was there really one or not? We don't know. We're not sure about that. But suppose there is a lion out there somewhere. Well, then in that case, yes, if there's a lion out there somewhere, then that means that there is some risk associated with leaving your house that day. But the implication that the slothful man makes is that, well, all other days there's zero risk, but today there's high risk. So today is so different from every other day that I'll stay in today. But I would ask this question: is every day really clear of risk? Is every other day really clear of risk? No. And it would be inaccurate and dishonest to say that it is. Any day that you go out and tend to your fields, or any day that you go out and work your business, or any day that you go out and fulfill your responsibilities, you could step on a nail. You could walk into a wall. You could slip on a slippery surface. You could cut yourself with a sharp object. You could contract any number of thousands of diseases. You've got hundreds of parts in your body. Any of them could malfunction. There's criminals out there that could mug you that are probably closer to your zip code than you realize every day. So the reality is there's risk associated with everything we do. And we have to remember that before we use risk as an excuse to do nothing. And so if there really is a lion out there, what needs to be asked is this: how long do I stay inside? How long until the lion's captured? How do I know that that's the only lion out there? What if there are others? Must I stay inside until the others are captured too? What if there's also tigers and bears? Oh my. Now do I sell my field? Now do I never have to accomplish anything? What other things might be out there? And how long is it okay? Of course there's risk. There's always going to be risk. The problem is we exaggerate the risk to shirk duty. We all do that. That's what our sinful minds lead us to do, and we've got to be cognizant of that. We will never fulfill God's calling on our lives if we only serve him and only obey him and only exert ourselves for him if and when the coast is clear and there's no chance of danger whatsoever. We'll never serve him then. There's always going to be danger. And we're going to give an account to him. And we're going to face him. And when we face the Lord, he's not going to say, now, was there ever any danger anywhere in your life? That's not the question he's going to ask. He's going to say, did you produce for me and did you labor for me despite the danger? And that's what we give an account for. Or did you let the danger stop you? Did you let the danger force you inside? Or did you do something for me despite the danger? I think of 1 Peter, where we're told to be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. You know what it doesn't conclude? It doesn't say, so then you don't ever have to serve God. If the devil, if he's roaring about, just stay inside, lock your door, and you don't have to serve me. That's not at all what it's saying. It says that know that he's out there, and I expect you to be out there and serving and working despite his presence out there. Just be vigilant about it. Just be sober about it. Don't be so vigilant and so sober that you lock yourself in your basement because of it. You know, if we don't even have to, this guy's more scared of this lion than the lion that is the devil. And so that's a good a comparison there. Suppose for a moment that he's at least partially right, and there is a lion out there somewhere. If you'll notice in chapter 22, verse 13. Okay, so put yourself in his shoes. Assume he's partially right. There's a lion out there somewhere. So you're thinking of all the possibilities in your mind. All right, I've got a lineup of a checklist of things that I need to do today. What might happen? What might happen to me? 22:13, the slothful man saith, there is a lion without, I shall be slain. I'm going to die. He jumps straight to the very worst possible of all outcomes. Are there not some other possible outcomes? But he goes straight to the most morbid, death. He assumes there is no chance of survival whatsoever. What a sign of cowardice. To jump straight to, I could die, I'm going to die. That's pure cowardice. That's a response that can be triggered by nothing other than fear. It ignores that response ignores the well-known fact that most wild animals typically don't attack people unless they're provoked, for the most part. And so if you just go about your business, odds are, if you just stick to your field or stick to your business and you don't go taking the lion by its tail just for fun, odds are you're going to be fine. Unless you have a pack of Slim Jims in your pocket or something that will get his attention. But if you immediately jump to the very worst possible outcome, like, I'm going to die, you know, the we're all going to die people are usually the crazy ones. You know, we can't do that. I'll die. If the person that jumps straight to, no, I'll die, usually there's some, you know, would you agree with me that is it safe to say that when you jump to the worst possible outcome, that might mean you're a little too pessimistic? That might mean you're a little too negative? And for the Christian child of God, Bible believer, one who's got the power of God, negativity and pessimism are really just other words for faithlessness, doubt, fear. Maybe we don't need to jump to the worst possible outcome for every scenario. Give you a couple examples. I think of that shepherd boy David, and he saw that lion approaching his flock, and he turned around and ran screaming like a little girl into his front door and turned the door behind him and locked all the bolts and fretted and ran upstairs and hid under his bed. No, he punched it in the face. He said, bring it on, because he had the power of God. And he's a believer. I think of Daniel. Daniel didn't let that serve. When Daniel prayed, he already knew. I looked back at that text just to make sure I was remembering it right. He already knew the law that had been passed. And he prayed anyway. He knew that it was a den of lions that would be his fate if he was caught praying. He knew that's what the consequence would be, and he prayed anyway. That's the opposite. He basically committed himself to the lion den rather than running from the lion. So that's number one. Will it ever be clear? No. Number two, exactly how unclear is it? The clear coast. Number two, exactly how unclear is it? Okay, so there's a lion in the streets. The coast isn't clear, but to what extent? Notice that he gives no specifics whatsoever. Proverbs 22:13, there's a lion without. Okay, so it's out of my house. There's a lion somewhere outside of my house in the streets. Which street? Proverbs 26:13. The slothful man saith, there's a lion in the way. A lion is in the streets, plural. Somehow one lion is in multiple streets. He lacks details. He lacks specifics. Makers of bogus and disingenuous excuses usually lack specifics. Makers of excuses thrive on vagueness. They always lack details. They're as vague as they can. And this guy does the same thing. He avoids details. Is there really a lion out there? Or did you just hear that there's a lion out there? And if you just heard that there's a lion out there, did you confirm that report anywhere? Did you spot it yourself? Did you see any evidence of it? How big was the lion? There's a startling lack of details. What's its location? Is it on your own property? Is it on the property of the guy next door? Is it fairly close? Is it a mile away? Is it 10 miles away? Is it within a 50-mile radius? Or is it just out there somewhere? Well, if lions exist, they have to live somewhere. I can't go to work today. There's a lion in the Serengeti. Well, that's pretty far away. I think I'll be fine. Of course, there's a lion out there somewhere. Well, it's in the street. Which street? How close is the lion from your field? How close is the lion from where you're supposed to go that day? Have you ever noticed that people who thrive on excuse making and love to get out of things, they're always vague. Because they know if they supply specific details, that's more opportunity for their excuse that's fabricated to be called out. The more details you give, the more can be rebutted. And so how many people, when they're calling in sick to work or laying out of church, or they told somebody that they'd help and they don't feel like it because it's raining and so that they won't help, or whatever, a million things, they told somebody they'd help them with something, and then they decide they're not going to do it. It's something like this. Yeah, no, I just wanted to let you know I'm not going to be there. I don't feel good. Feel good. That's all? Like, that could mean 10,000 things. Like, feel mentally, emotionally, part of your body doesn't feel good. You don't feel good about the air out there today. Like, it's kind of a red flag when people withhold details, because usually, and it's not all the time, so there are people who guard information very zealously and they're very private. So there are some exceptions, but generally when somebody has a real issue that's legitimate and valid, they're usually going to say, look, I know I told you I'd help, and I know I told you I'd be there, but I've got major digestive issues going on right now, or I've got a knee replacement that has to happen, or I got a plumbing leak and I'm in the water up to my knees here. Usually they'll give you some kind of specific reason. And so that's a red flag. Dodginess and vagueness go together. So what's really going on here? Deflection. The excuse maker produces a story to conceal the real sin in his heart. What's God emphasizing here? It's a slothful man. It's a slothful man. That's the reason why he's saying the things he's saying. He's not saying what he's saying based out of genuine concern for safety. He's a slothful man. He's looking for reasons to remain slothful. So it's the slothfulness of his heart. And so that's why excuses happen. Our sinful heart conspires to disguise and hide and conceal the sinfulness of our heart. So he's not going to say, I'm lazy. I'm going to be derelict today. I'm a lazy man with little character, so I'm going to do nothing. Of course, he's not going to come out and say that. Instead, he produces this possibility of a wild animal walking around outside. But what we're trying to do when we do that is shift attention away from our slothfulness. The slothful heart is always going to claim I can't, because claiming I can't sounds a whole lot better than admitting that I won't. So when our heart isn't right with God, we will turn won'ts into can'ts. And what we're trying to do is disguise and cover up that our won't is a can't, when really it's a won't. There's a difference there. The emphasis on this verse is not on the danger of lions. It's on the extent to which the slothful man will go to avoid work. And he'll come up with some pretty off-the-wall excuses. This is Johnson. I can't come in today. There's lions at my house. The boss is going to say, Johnson, get in here and quit coming up with funny stories. Because when we are trying to deceive others, when our heart is intent on deceiving others, we always deceive ourselves. Because we've told ourselves that our story is believable when it's not believable. And we don't realize how transparent it is. We don't realize how easily others see that. No matter what it is, if we really want it, we will generate reasons to do it. If we really don't want it, we will generate reasons not to do it. It all comes down to the will. I've had people tell me, well, I can't be in church, this service or that service or for this program or whatever forever because of work. Well, so you're always going to have that job? Well, do you want to be? And it turns out they didn't want to be in church. They didn't want to serve. They didn't want to be out soul winning. They didn't want to be there to clean. They didn't want to be part of the program. When they just wrote out, well, because of this situation, I can't forever. But then I've also seen others that have said, Pastor, I really want to be involved in this. Right now, I've got a conflict. Right now, I've got this, but I'm working at it. And I'm angling, and I know I'm going to be able, and I've prayed about it. And if this doesn't work out, I'll switch a shift and I'll switch a job and I'll work because I want to be there. I want to be involved. I want to be part of what God is doing. And because the will is there, God always seems to honor that. And what's the difference? The one said, never. Well, then what did he really want in the first place? That man didn't really want to be part of things. It comes down to the will. And then lastly, number 3, speaking of is the coast clear? Number 1, will it ever be? Number 2, exactly how unclear is it? Number 3, can it be made clearer? Can it be made clearer? Notice how quickly, when the slothful man decides that the coast is unclear, look how quickly he gives up. I'm going to die. And that's it. There's no solutions offered whatsoever. He just closes the door behind him. He doesn't try to think through the problem. He makes no effort whatsoever to actually solve his obstacle, to try to get past his obstacle. He does nothing. He notices an obstacle, doesn't try to remove it, considers no solutions. A diligent man, what's the opposite of a slothful man? In Proverbs, is the diligent man. How does a diligent man handle finding an unexpected obstacle or deterrent on the path of his usual routine of work? The diligent man says, I'm going to figure something out here so I can get to my work. I've got stuff that I need to get done, stuff God wants me to get done, and we've got to find a way around this problem, and he's going to do something about it. He's going to say, what can we do? And so you picture, all right, so you're in ancient Israel, and okay, there's a lion out there somewhere. So what are you going to do? Well, get some of my neighbors together, call them on the tin can phone or whatever, blow the horn, get on the roof and call them. And guys, what can we do? Can we throw together a makeshift animal control team? Do we have any weapons? Can we lure? Has anyone got a stake? Can we maybe lure the lion? Where did it come from? Did it come from the jungle? Did it come from the mountains? Is there something we can do? Can we set a trap? Can we lure it away? Maybe we can strap a yoke to it and make that bad boy tread our corn for us while we're at it. But we got work that needs to get done. Let's get this done, boys. We've got some profitability that's expected of us. We want to be productive servants. We don't want to just stay inside all day and do nothing and look for reasons to do it. There's a deterrent out here, but let's fix it. That's the heart of the diligent man. My heart is to be profitable for God. The diligent man's heart is to be productive for God rather than looking for reasons not to. The diligent man enjoys the challenge. That would be kind of fun. It's kind of exciting. We're working with wild animals. Maybe my kids and grandkids can hear the story about how we still brought in the harvest that year, even though there was a lion. And the story will probably grow, and the lions will probably multiply as generations go on. But it's fun. The diligent man uses his imagination to envision ways to achieve and ways to produce and ways to be profitable. The slothful man uses his imagination to come up with ways not to achieve and not to produce and not to be profitable. So either way, they're both using their imagination. So if you're going to use your imagination anyway, you might as well use it for good and not for evil. You might as well use it to get something done rather than doing nothing. Here's what is also noticeably absent from the slothful man's thinking as he employs this excuse. You know what I don't see anywhere here? The power of God. He's omitted that. I don't see that. I'm not saying I don't see the power of God in the scripture. I'm saying I don't see the power of God in this man's thinking. I can't, I'll die. Bye. Door slam. How about praying? How about, Lord, you have power over lions. You're their creator. You expect me to produce today and to get something done today. Lord, can you lead this lion elsewhere? Lord, can you work in its instincts and send it home? Okay, maybe it's just chasing its cub. Can you let it find its cub? Can you, Lord, can you let me go out and protect me today? Can you keep me safe? I've heard that it's an acre or a couple acres from where I'll be. I may be close. Lord, can you protect me as I go out and serve in my field today? It's absent from the slothful man's thinking. The power of God is not part of his thinking. It turns out God has a history of showing his power over lions. We talked about Daniel and David, but even in the New Testament, you find Paul, he says in Corinthians, he said, you know what happened to me at Ephesus? I had to fight with beasts. Like the Colosseum. like criminals had to face vicious animals who had been starved so the Romans could be entertained by bloodshed. And Paul had to fight with beasts. And he tells Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4, he said, I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion. Does he mean literally he was in the mouth, or he was made to fight with beasts? And God showed his power. And God delivered him from the lion. If God can deliver Paul and Daniel and David and the Samson and the others, then God can deliver this man. But the slothful man doesn't get stuff like that, because the slothfulness that's prevailing in his heart keeps him from getting stories like that, keeps him from reporting victories like that. It turns out what blows up all of the excuses that are illegitimate, not viable, is the power of God. The power of God blows up all of our excuses. Whatever's keeping me from doing what I ought to do, God can change it. God can get it out of the way. It may be on his timing. It might not be on ours, but we must acknowledge his power. We saw that in this series when we looked at, in the book of Joshua, at the tribe of Joseph that said, well, we can't clear this mountain because the enemy has chariots of iron. And they forgot or didn't realize that the history of Israel up to that point had a precedent of repeated incidents of God showing his power over chariots and God destroying enemy chariots. And he even says a little bit later on that the chariots of God are 20,000 angels. That's a much better chariot. That's what you have access to. You forgot the power of God. And that's what the slothful man does here in Proverbs 22 and Proverbs 26. The coast might not be clear, but God can clear any coast. And if we use the unclear coast as an excuse, then we've failed to recognize that we've got a God that can clear it for us. And he'll honor our desire to be profitable. Someone said this. I'm not sure who exactly. Probably many people have taken credit for this quote. 80% of success in life is just showing up. Isn't that exactly what this guy failed to do? I'm not even going to show up for work today. 80% of success is just showing up. Just be there. Just drag yourself out. Go against the grain. Be willing to be uncomfortable and do that which isn't pleasant. And just be there. Even when you don't feel like it, just be there. And at some point, you'll be glad you got to work it. And once you get into that field and you get into a rhythm and you start to get the harvest going, you're glad you were there that day. You're glad you're not at home playing video games. Just show up. And the people that have the habit of just showing up, they tend to be successful people in all walks of life. So to conclude, let's not look for reasons to hide. Let's look for reasons to produce. The harvest is ripe. So the fields are ripe under the harvest, and we are tasked with being profitable for the Lord. So let's get into those harvest fields. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your word. Lord, forgive us when we're guilty of this, when we exaggerate risk to avoid labor. Lord, there's times when we're intentionally vague to conceal our own laziness. Forgive us, Lord, when we accept too easily the things that prevent us from doing right. Lord, forgive us when we just give up so easily, give in so easily. Father, help us to trust always in thy mighty power And remind us, Lord, that you are able to help us and assist us and enable us as we go through this life trying to count for you and trying to make a difference for you. Might that be our heart. In Jesus' precious